Welcome to Menopause, Marriage and Motherhood, a podcast that's all about changing the way we view midlife and bringing the conversation about menopause out into the open. Each week we share stories, experiences and inspiration. We talk to experts on how to best navigate this time of life and find out how other people have not only survived but thrived through this time. I'm your host, Karen O'Connor. Hello and welcome to this final episode of the Menopause, Marriage and Motherhood podcast. I'm kind of not sorry for dropping that in on you, but don't worry, the podcast isn't stopping. I'm just doing a bit of a rebrand and having a bit of a change and a shake-up. As you've probably noticed over the last few months, the kind of topics that we're covering has extended beyond just being about menopause, marriage and motherhood. And while we're still talking about those things, we've also dedicated a lot of time to more social issues and women's issues and personal development stuff. So as well as the how-to information, we're spending a lot more time on the more thought-provoking things, the things that move our lives and other people's lives forward as well. One of the things that I've noticed over the last few years is that when people, particularly women, get to a certain age, they kind of feel invisible and ignored. And it obviously has a massive impact on your self-esteem and self-confidence, which is such a sad state of affairs because the more experience you have, the more you've actually got to offer the world because you got all that experience and wisdom behind you. It's one of those things that makes you go, In every episode of this podcast, whether it's one of the earlier episodes where we spoke to Dr. Wendy Sweet about weight loss during menopause, or one of the more recent episodes, like where we spoke to Dr. Tom Jordan about relationships and how what happened in your early years has an impact on what happens in your later years and how you go about creating relationships, or whether it's one of the episodes that I co-host with my son Ryan, where we talk about whatever topic comes up for us. Each episode of the podcast has its moments where you go, that's interesting, isn't it? Or I usually go, oh, wow, haven't thought of that. Oh, and then we go on to the next topic. That's not going to change. All that's changed is that I'm not limiting myself and my guests to topics that are purely about menopause, marriage and motherhood. It's kind of growing as we grow in life. And I will still cover menopause issues because, let's face it, it matters. And the way Western society thinks about menopause needs to change. It needs to be more in the open. But I'm just also going to include other topics. So the focus will be about expanding our lives, thinking about the things that we may not have considered before and discussing topics to help us get clear on what's important in our lives and to us and what matters, which kind of sounds a little bit vague and wishy-washy, but to give you an idea of what I mean, in the upcoming weeks, I'll be having conversations about gender roles and sex discrimination and what happens when you transition from one gender to another. How does the rest of the world view that? How do you deal with it internally yourself? I'm also going to be talking to a guest about female archetypes, conflict resolution, amicable divorce. Yes, there is such a thing. I wasn't too sure that there was such a thing, but there actually is. And also an interesting conversation, what life's like in the deep redneck pro-Trump heart of the Midwest of the US for a woman who is a liberal-minded woman. She's a Democrat who also has a daughter that's transitioning into being a man. That's an interesting conversation. But then I'm also talking to a gynecologist about hormone health during menopause. So like I say, nothing's really changed. It's just that I don't want to limit myself anymore, and I don't want to feel that I have to restrict the conversations or have people who might be impacted by this podcast but would pass over something with the title Menopause, Marriage and Motherhood, but might click on things that make you go, So the New Look podcast is just an expansion and an acknowledgement of where we're already heading. I would love your feedback and your thoughts about this change. and also on the new look logo and colours and everything. So if you could let me know about that, that would be fantastic. You can either comment under this video or drop me a line on social media or email at karen@karenoconnor.net. And you don't need to do anything. Nothing will change. The feed will be the same. All that's going to happen is the name's changed and there's a new channel logo. That's it. Hopefully, everything else will happen seamlessly in the background. Fingers crossed. But we know what life can be like. So let's see if that one makes me go, See you next week. Thanks for joining us this week on Menopause, Marriage and Motherhood. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite player, and while you're at it, we'd love you to leave us a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would be amazing too. Be sure to tune in next week for the next episode, and remember, if you're busy thinking about what you can't have, how on earth are you going to enjoy what you can have? See you next week.